Want to know the top 3 ways to adapt every conversation so both parties can come out with a win? Hey, welcome everybody. This is Anita. We're here for Mom Talk, episode 10 of the podcast. So, today we're going to talk about 3 different ways that you can adapt your approach to every conversation so that it comes out on the winning side. And we're talking about even hard conversations, good conversations, all that kind of stuff. So you can come out on the winning side instead of on the losing side, where you walk away from the conversations feeling maybe frustrated or you didn't get through to the other person or something like that. So let's talk about those 3 different ways. And like we do on every episode of the podcast of Mom Talk, we always like to give you practical tips. I love to give you practical tips to be able to implement right now, right today, so that you can have just a better life and a better business and more freedom as you walk forward. So let's talk about adapting your approach. So there's a couple of 3 things that we want to talk about today. So number 1 is this all starts with me. And what I mean by that is that as I pay attention to what people are saying, and I pay attention to where they're coming from, and I pay attention to these 3 things that we're going to talk about, their attitude, perspective, and what they're believing, this actually it's so simple, but sometimes not easy. And it helps every conversation that I walk into. And I try to employ these tactics every day. We're not talking about manipulating people to get your own way or anything like that. It's just being able to have more healthy conversations with everyone that we come across in all areas of your life. And so let's talk about those 3 things. So the first thing that I recognize when I'm talking to somebody is their attitude. So, we have very different conversations. Sometimes when somebody's attitude is, hooray, everything's going great. I have peace, I have joy, and I'm open and willing, and my posture's open, and I want to have a conversation. And so I really try to pay attention to that, because oftentimes the attitude of the other person will, if I'm listening for that, then it actually can determine what approach to take to try and help another person or try and navigate a conversation that might be difficult. And so I start paying attention to their attitude, usually first, and that can come out in body language, it can come out in tone of voice, it can come out in a lot of different ways. It can come out in the words that they use. So for instance, when I'm working with clients and I hear things like, I can't, or no, or the problem is, or that kind of language, then I'm thinking, somewhere along the way, there's probably like a block that needs to be released in order for them to be able to shift what they're doing. And so the first thing that I always look for is attitude. What's the attitude of the person? Where are they coming from? And then how can I help that? How can I maybe mirror that? Recently I have a friend who was walking through something really, really difficult. And so coming into the conversation with her, and as she is walking through a challenging situation and a stressful situation, well, then it wouldn't really make sense for me to come in and be like the cheerleader and the rah-rah, when what she really needs is someone to listen to her, because she's just having a hard time. She's stressed out. She has a hard time seeing things anywhere other than she sees them right now. And so that's number 1. And so as we talk about these different things, we're talking about adapting your approach, ladies, as you communicate effectively with other people. So number 1 is just check the person's attitude. Number 2 in this list is the perspective. Another way that we can look at perspective is based on our mindset. So where is the person's perspective coming from? Where is their mindset coming from? It is different than attitude to have a perspective. I can be super joyful, but have a perspective that's very limiting. And so I'm also listening for different versions of either like an abundance mindset or a limiting mindset. These 2 things don't have anything to do with money at all. So just for anybody who's thinking that has to do with money, I'm just going to set you straight right there. It's The difference between somebody who has like a pessimistic attitude and an optimistic attitude, right? An optimist is going to have more of an abundance and mindset and be more open. Their perspective is everything's great all the time. People are always kind and nice as a general rule. The world is a good place, those kinds of things. If the perspective or the mindset of the person is more pessimistic, it's something like, you can't trust anybody, or everything always goes wrong, or I knew this would happen. I said that it was 3 times in a row and something bad was going to happen, or, that kind of language that is really, in some ways, or maybe condemns them or condemns someone else when perhaps that's not what's really going on in the situation. So, item number 2 that we try and focus on is understand the person's perspective. Now, in that, again, what I can do is I can either model the perspective to try to help them, because really everybody we know wants to be seen and heard. We all want that as humans. And so when I understand their perspective, then I can help somebody else feel more seen and more heard. And that's super important. It helps people to feel valued and helps them to feel like they have worth in the world. And so those are some of the things and reasons why we adjust the way that we communicate as Christian working moms and entrepreneurial minded ladies so that we can better communicate with other people. So that's number 2. Number 1 was we look at the attitude. Number 2, we pay attention to the person's perspective. And that's another word for mindset. So number 3, that we're going to talk about just for today, and adapting your approach, remember, based on what the other person, where they're coming from, so that you can have better communication, is what are they believing? So this might be their belief system in terms of like their faith and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't have to be. Like, I can believe a lie. I can believe a truth that is really irrespective of my faith. And so it can be in that capacity. It often is in that capacity. I'll take an example. If I believe the Bible is true from cover to cover and everything that God's word says is accurate, which I do, then if I hear something that's counter to the word of God, then it's actually not going to sit right with me. I'm not going to, I know that God's a good God. And if I hear somebody say God's wrathful and he's angry all the time, well, that belief system, in this case of like God's a mad dad or he's a good dad, can you see how that totally colors my judgment and changes the way that I view actually everything in my entire life? And so the other ways that we can apply this when we're talking about believing what the person is believing is maybe the person is believing, we talked about truth or lies. So perhaps I'll just use an example for myself. If I look at my husband and he says something to me, hey, babe, you want to go out on a date tonight or something like that, and I'm thinking in my mind, oh, my husband loves me. He wants to take me out. And so then therefore I'm receptive to him because I'm believing that he has the best and he wants to go out and have fun with me that evening and treat me to something nice. Versus the belief system that says my husband wants to ask me out for dinner because he wants to, I don't know, he only wants to do what he wants to do, or he wants to try to, I don't know, butter me up to manipulate me and to talk me into something or something like that. Like, we see these kind of dynamics happen in relationships. And I'm just using that as one example for the belief system. And so depending on what the person, their belief system is all about, that completely and utterly like shifts both the previous 2 that we discussed. It shifts our perspective and it shifts our attitude. And so a lot of times just understanding, well, what's the belief system about the person? And remember, it can be in terms of faith, but it doesn't have to be. It can be applied across the board. Okay, so for today, our podcast for today, those are our 3 practical things that when I want to have better communication with others, then it's often a good idea to pay attention to the person's attitude, to their perspective, and to their belief system. And then as I understand those things better, then I'm actually better able to meet them where they're at, to communicate effectively with them, to help them to see maybe a different perspective, to help them overcome a hurdle, to be able, when I understand the perspective of my kids, then I can help them more successfully walk through and navigate the challenges of life as they grow up. When I understand the perspective of my employees and my team members, well, then I can help them work through problems. When I understand the perspective and the attitude of clients or potential clients, then I can change my approach and help them work through a problem or help them see where we need to grow a little bit more. So, those are the 3 things that I have for you today. I'd love to hear back from you. So there's lots more that you can use. If you want to share those, go ahead and either message me directly or go ahead and post them in the comments below the video on whatever platform that you watch or listen to this podcast on. The other thing that you can do is report back. Tell me how, when you paid attention to these 3 things in a conversation with another person, how did the conversation shift? I'd love to hear how, when you implemented some of these different things, how they worked for you. So, ladies, be well. Know that I'm always praying for you. I care about you even before I know you. And I'm your biggest cheerleader. So have a great day.